In the dusty town of Red Rock, where the sun always seemed to hang heavy in the sky and the wind whistled through the narrow, empty streets, there was a legend about a group of bank robbers who had once pulled off the most daring heist the West had ever seen. It was said that their story was as long and winding as the canyons that stretched out beyond the horizon, a tale of betrayal, loyalty, and the pursuit of freedom. It all started with two men, Jesse Snake Eyes Malone and his best friend, Tom Whisper McAllister. Jesse was known far and wide for his silver tongue and fast hands. He could talk his way into and out of just about anything. Tom, on the other hand, was quiet and calculating, a man who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. Together, they were unstoppable, a duo that had pulled off more than a dozen small-time heists across the frontier without ever getting caught. But Jesse had bigger dreams. He didn't just want to rob small-town banks for chump change. He wanted to pull off a score so big it would go down in history. And there was one bank that he had his eye on, the Red Rock National Bank, the most heavily fortified and wealthiest institution in the entire territory. Red Rock was no ordinary town. It was a place where railroad barons, cattle tycoons, and politicians kept their fortunes. The bank itself was a fortress, thick stone walls, iron bars on the windows, and a vault that was said to be impenetrable. But Jesse wasn't deterred. If anything, the challenge only made him more determined. One night, as the two men sat in a dimly lit saloon, Jesse laid out his plan to Tom. It was audacious, to say the least. The vault wasn't just guarded by walls and locks, it was protected by a rotating schedule of armed Pinkerton agents, men who were known for their ruthlessness. Jesse knew they couldn't just walk in and demand the money, they'd need a team, and they'd need a plan so airtight that even the Pinkertons wouldn't see it coming. Tom, always the cautious one, raised an eyebrow. "This is big, Jesse. Too big. We're talking more than just a quick in and out. One wrong move, and we're dead men." Jesse leaned back in his chair, a glint in his eye. "That's why we're gonna do it smart, Whisper. We've been playing small time long enough. This is our chance to make a real name for ourselves." And so the planning began. The first recruit was a man named Wild Bill Donahue, a demolition expert with a reputation for blowing open safes with surgical precision. Bill was rough around the edges, a former miner with a mean streak, but he had a steady hand and nerves of steel. Next came Clara Ravenheart, a con artist who had run more scams than anyone could count. She had the beauty and charm to fool any man, but behind her disarming smile was a mind sharp enough to outwit the best. She'd be the one to create distractions and throw the Pinkertons off their trail. Rounding out the crew was Ezekiel Doc Barnes, a disgraced surgeon with a gambling problem who had fallen on hard times. He wasn't much for fighting, but he could patch up a wound in minutes, and he had a way with locks that bordered on genius. If anyone could crack the bank's vault, it was Doc. For weeks, the group met in secret, studying the bank's layout, learning the Pinkertons' shifts, and planning every detail down to the last second. Jesse's plan wasn't just to steal money, he wanted to make it look like the perfect crime, no bloodshed, no loose ends, just in and out with the gold. The day of the heist arrived like a shadow over Red Rock. The crew moved into place just before dawn, blending into the early morning crowds of workers and townsfolk. Jesse and Clara played the part of a wealthy couple, dressed in fine clothes, while Tom and Bill posed as drifters in the saloon across the street. Doc waited nearby, disguised as a street vendor. As the bank opened, Clara walked inside with Jesse on her arm, her sweet voice drawing the attention of the bank manager. They had carefully planned this part. Clara would distract him while Jesse assessed the security measures inside. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until one small detail went wrong. A lone Pinkerton agent, stationed at the bank's back door, had been replaced by a new recruit. This man wasn't on their schedule, and worse, he wasn't following the usual routines. Jesse noticed the change immediately. He signaled to Tom, who was watching from the saloon window. They had to act fast. Jesse calmly walked to the back of the bank and opened a side door, letting in Tom and Bill. The three of them moved quickly through the halls, making their way toward the vault. Doc, meanwhile, was already in the basement, where he began working on the lock. He had studied the vault's mechanism for weeks, and with a series of precise turns, he heard the satisfying click of the final tumbler falling into place. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of gold bars and bags of coins. But just as they began loading the loot into sacks, a shout echoed through the bank. The new Pinkerton had grown suspicious of Clara's distraction and had drawn his gun. In the confusion, the manager triggered the silent alarm, and within moments, the sound of hooves thundered through the streets. More Pinkerton agents were on their way. Jesse's plan was falling apart. He shouted for everyone to grab what they could and make a run for it. Clara slipped out the front, blending into the crowd, while Bill and Tom held the back door, exchanging gunfire with the approaching agents. Doc, weighed down by the gold, stumbled as he tried to escape through a side alley. They were so close to getting away clean, but the Pinkertons were relentless. As they reached their horses, Jesse saw Bill take a bullet to the shoulder. He stumbled but waved them on. "Go!" Bill shouted. "I'll hold them off." Jesse hesitated, but there was no time. He knew Bill's fate was sealed. The remaining four rode out of town at breakneck speed, the sound of gunshots fading behind them. They had the gold, but at a terrible cost. Bill was gone, and the Pinkertons were sure to be hot on their trail. For days, they rode through the wilderness, hiding in the canyons and forests, always looking over their shoulders. They had a fortune, but nowhere to spend it. Every town was a risk, every stranger a potential threat. The Pinkertons were relentless, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Tensions within the group began to rise. Tom blamed Jesse for pushing them into a heist that had been too risky from the start. Clara, who had always been the pragmatic one, started talking about cutting their losses and splitting the gold while they still could. Even Doc, who had never been the bravest, was growing restless, constantly checking his back. Then, one fateful night, as they camped in a secluded canyon, the Pinkertons finally found them. They had tracked the group through the wilderness, and now they were closing in fast. Jesse knew there was no escape this time. He turned to his crew, his once confident eyes now filled with a mix of determination and regret. "This is it," he said. "We fight, or we run. But either way, we don't give them that gold." Clara shook her head. "You're crazy, Jesse. They'll hunt us down no matter what we do. It's over." Tom, ever the loyal friend, stood by Jesse's side. "If this is how it ends, I'm with you." The final showdown was brutal. In the dead of night, the canyon echoed with the sound of gunfire and shouts. One by one, the members of Jesse's crew fell. Doc was the first to go, shot while trying to flee. Clara managed to take down a few agents before being cornered and captured. And Tom, ever silent, fought until his last breath, standing back to back with Jesse. As dawn broke, Jesse stood alone, his body riddled with bullets, surrounded by fallen Pinkertons. His eyes scanned the horizon one last time before he collapsed to the ground, the weight of his dreams crashing down with him. The legend of Jesse Snake Eyes Malone and his crew lived on in Red Rock and beyond. Some said they had gotten away with the gold, hiding it somewhere in the wilderness, while others claimed it was cursed, buried with their bodies in the canyon. To this day, treasure hunters search the canyons around Red Rock, hoping to find the lost fortune of the greatest bank robbers the West had ever known. But no one ever does, and the winds that whistle through the canyons seem to carry only one word on their lips: Snake Eyes.